everything is great, you don't have any exceedances. The sample frequency reduction, is that something we're going to have to actively send a letter to you to request that, or is SMART's going to know that and say that you only have to have so many frequency, how many sampling events do you have?
Can you help me with this one, Laura? I'm not sure what. We're still designing the system, but it's based on the permit requirements.
So the one thing SMARTS will do is it'll calculate, if you've had 4 qualifying storm events under the action levels. And if you do have that, it's kind of a thing where you go into SMARTS, this is what we're thinking about, where you go into SMARTS and you say, I'd like to submit the frequency reduction. It may run a completion check, and then your sampling event status would change, just kind of like a compliance group. If it runs the completion check of you being in a group and you meet X, Y, and Z, then it can change your raw data requirements. It'll be something of that nature. We haven't worked out all of the bugs, but I think you're going to have to initiate the request. If not, we may just send out an email or something saying, hey, you have 4 qualifying storm events under all the exceedances. You qualify for the frequency reduction. Would you like to continue? So it could be one or the other. But SMARTS will be involved.
Actually, just a quick follow-up question on that then. Let's say you had a retention pond and you sample all the discharged contained water, and you do 4 before the first half of the year is done. Does that mean you don't have to do it for the second half of the year?
Potentially. Yeah. You could. Well, no. No. Sorry, some of these questions you have to think about them. The requirement is 2 in the first part of the reporting year and 2 in the second. So I think you'd have to go through the 1 year, depending, because we want to get the characterization of your site throughout the whole year before. My first instinct is that you would have to do the first year for qualifying storm events. And we had her first. Okay.
This is another question based on someone else's. The no exposure certification as far as downloadable forms. Are you guys going to have the checklist for the operators or QUISPs or whoever do it to go out to those sites and use so that they know what they're making sure of for the no exposure?
Again, it's not going to be a form, but the checklist is in the permit.
Yeah, it's the 11 categories of no exposure. It's the exact permit language. So you would just take that out, and the NEC attachment or appendix.
And I'm sorry, this isn't really a SMARTS question, but just to confirm something that I think that you might have misspoke. There is no ability for sample reduction for contained stormwater. So if you have your stormwater that all goes to a retention pond, you have to sample every time you discharge, whether it's 1 time a year or 10 times a year. Is that correct? Okay. Well.
It's a good question.
Okay, I think this gentleman just answered my question, but in the old permit, we did have to submit reasonings as to why we only had the 1 discharge. Are we going to continue doing that?
Okay, so the question is, if you didn't get your number of samples you were supposed to do you have to explain that in the annual report? Yes. If you didn't get your 4 qualifying storm events, you would have to explain why. And it's not a violation not to get them if there just wasn't rain. I mean, that's the. Okay, we are over the time for the SMARTS stuff. So if there's further questions on SMARTS, email the stormwater. Do you have that email address?
Oh, I took it down.
Oh.
You guys can email me, our stormwater help desk. For those online, we're going to post a presentation. You can, again, email myself or email the help desk, and we'll answer them.
Don't everybody run away now. um, yeah, if you want to take a break, what I think before I start talking, I see people falling asleep. Maybe everybody just stand up for a minute, a couple seconds. If you want to stand up and stretch for a second, then I'll feel like you're going to be awake. And I'll be quick, a lot quicker. No, I just was watching, I was looking out and I'm like, man, yeah, like at least, and then the information's just flying at you and flying at you and flying at you. Yeah, yeah, because if you turn it up too hard, it'll like reverberate. That's Laurel, yeah. Maybe her mom's dead. I think she's native. I think she's, from around here. Young. I mean, I say young. I don't know. I'm guessing third. Yeah. Maybe. Okay, everybody, we're going to regroup now so we can get out of here. Try to get you out of here early. Okay, I'm just going to introduce myself one more time. I'm Michelle Canan. As Laurel said, I'm a member of the Industrial General Permit Training Team. We've been working for the last year and a half almost on developing the QUISP training materials. And I work for a company called ETIC Engineering. And I'm a professional geologist by trade and been doing stormwater in California since way back in the early 90s when it all got started. So been around for a while, but I'm just going to go over, like I said, I'm going to make it really pretty quick. I'm just going to talk about when do you need a QUISP. A lot of the things I'm going to mention, Laurel and Patrick may have already discussed, so I'm going to just kind of buzz through the things that we've already discussed. We'll talk about the prerequisites, the qualifications for being a QUISP, how we developed the training program, which we're doing right now. It's not completed yet. Kind of the timeline on when the training will be available. And just some tips, reiterating some of the things that Laurel has already said and Patrick has already said about planning ahead and getting a jump on it so that you're ready to go prior to the deadline of July 1. And then we'll have questions again like we did for the other speakers. So when do you need a QUISP? And this is just like Laurel said, if you're in baseline and you start on July 1 of this year, 2015, you don't need a QUISP until you exceed the triggers for the NAL exceedances during a reporting year. You don't need the QUISP until the following July. So, and if you never exceed, which would be your goal, you would essentially not need a QUISP. So some of you dischargers out there that haven't had issues in the past, you may never need a QUISP in the future. So for level 1 and level 2, you need the QUISP, and then any new dischargers with that discharge to 303 impaired receiving waters. The prerequisites. I know for the CGP there were some prerequisites, but there are no prerequisites for the QUISP training or to become a QUISP. And it's not intended to cover every single detail of the new permit. But you basically need to have a general knowledge. You probably wouldn't want to send, you know, I don't know, someone that's just that is doing, you know, not really involved in the industrial activities of the facility. You wouldn't want to send your receptionist probably to go get the QUISP training, but someone that's familiar with the permit and is involved in the program at the facility. Should have a good understanding of the permit and the Clean Water Act. And basically what the training is going to do is just give more information so that you learn more about how to implement the actual permit requirements. So again, the professional engineers and geologists, just like with the CGP, you will not have to go through the formal QUISP training online and classroom training. There'll be a streamlined parallel process that goes right along at probably around the same time frame that the QUISP training comes out. There will be the online, you know, parallel training for the professional engineers and geologists. And then you definitely have to have an engineer for inactive mining sites, for the NONA technical reports, and the subchapter N calculations, which are related to the effluent limit guidelines. So there are some instances where you will have to have a PE involved. So the program development, we're doing that right now. Like I said, we've been involved or working on this since about September of 2012. The IGP training team originally got together. The members are industry people, consultants, regulators, and some of the folks from Sac State Office of Water Programs are also on the team. And so we applied for the positions and were selected and kicked off our work. I think it was 2013, maybe August of 2013, we started meeting. So there's about 15 members, and then we have multiple volunteers, and some of you volunteers are out here in the audience that help us with, there's a lot to do to develop this training, and with only 15 of us and everybody having full-time jobs, we do use volunteers. So if you want to volunteer, you know, come talk to us. And then we all committed to a 1 to 2 year and, you know, various amount of effort put into it. We attend the meetings every month, and then in between we basically have homework or things we need to get done within our groups so that we can report back every month to just keep this process going so we can get the training out there for you as soon as possible. This is just a little plug for the folks that are on the committee, the training team. You can see there that there's a variety of different people of both consultants and dischargers and others. So that's our whole list. I'm not going to read everybody's names. If you're on the phone, don't be offended if I don't read your name. The list is up so you can see who's on the team. So what is the training program going to consist of? It's basically going to be an online training, about 16 hours of online training, which we will present content, and then as you're going through the training online, there'll be quizzes, and then at the end, there'll be an exam that you have to pass. And then once you pass that exam, you would be eligible to go to the one-day classroom training, which will be presented by a trainer of record. And then after you finish the classroom, there's no further exam or anything else you have to do. You pay your fee up front. You pay the fee up front to start the online training. And then you'll receive your quiz number, and then you'll, probably similar to the CGP, have to recertify. I don't know if it's every 2 years, probably, something like that. So the online training, we're going to try to make it more interactive. If you have done the CGP training or went to the live classroom CGP SWRCB training. There's a lot of content to cover in a short period of time, and it was a lot of just reiteration of the permit requirements. But what we're trying to do with the IGP is just to make it more interesting and more applicable to what you're going to actually be doing as a QUISP. So we'll have content, we'll have videos, little video clips maybe, we'll have links to outside resources, photos that you can look at, little quizzes to test you along the way, just to kind of keep you interested as you're going through the training. And then to go along with it, we'll have these site scenarios, we're calling them, which will be from various SIC codes. We won't take anybody's specific information, so don't be concerned that your facility will end up as one of our scenarios. It may look familiar, but we're taking real life situations, scenarios, and creating basically a template that is kind of like a SWIP that will be provided to you, and then as you go through the online training, you will be asked to refer back to the site map, to look at the discharge locations, to look at the SWIP, to look at the chain of custody, and you'll be trained along the way using these scenarios, which hopefully will make it more interesting than just permit. No offense, Laurel, but just regurgitating the permit, you know, might get old. And you'll be able to complete that training at your own pace. And we're estimating that, you know, once you get started, we want to put some kind of, and I don't know if we've actually determined this for sure, but we want to put some kind of limit on it. Like you can't come back 5 years later and try to finish it up. So we're talking about 2 years, but we don't, of the time, from the time you register for the training to the time you need to complete it, or it goes away. So the classroom will be further review of what you learned online, but it's going to be more practical. There'll be more time for Q&A. There'll be demonstrations, case studies. You know, we'll go through the specifics of, you know, doing the report, the technical reports, and the level 1 ERAs. It'll be a lot more hands-on than what you'll get online. And then the examination, this is the examination that's online. So you'll have questions, like I already kind of talked about this, you'll have general questions regarding the permit. You'll also have questions that refer back to the specific site scenarios to make sure that you actually looked at the map and understand, you know, what's going on at the facility. And so we'll be testing your ability, you know, as a QUISP, you're going to have to be able to get all the site information, look at it, evaluate it, and make some decisions about, you know, what is needed at the facility. So we're going to be testing that in the online portion. And then there'll be, you know, some questions on your broader knowledge of the IGP. We want to focus on what does it take to be a QUISP? What do you need to know to be a QUISP? But in order to be a QUISP, you're going to have a little bit of broader knowledge about the permit and the Clean Water Act. So there'll be some of that on the exam also. So the timeline, we already had a feedback forum around, it was February of almost a year ago, where we presented our initial thoughts on how we were going to develop the training, and we got feedback from dischargers and others who were in attendance at the feedback forum. And then we took that information, we kind of went back and retooled and continued to develop the training materials. So we're almost there. We're getting there. But our plan is that, and I know that everyone's out there waiting with bated breath for, you know, when are we going to get the TORs in place? And so we're working on the RFQ right now that's supposed to go out in March of 2015 for folks to apply to become a TOR. And then those applications, proposals will be evaluated, and then we're hoping that by June 15th, 16th, we've already got it reserved. We got the rooms reserved and everything to have the TOR / compliance group leaders, because compliance group leaders will need to be TORs. We'll have that training, which will be sort of a you know, shortened training compared to the online 2-day training. And so you kind of get it all in once, the online training and the classroom, all at once. So that'll happen hopefully in June, and then by July, we're hoping by the time the permit goes live that there will be 2 ORs out there, which means there will be QUISPs out there, even though you don't really need the QUISP officially until the year following, if you go out of baseline status. Then in the fall of 2015, and again, this is subject to us getting all our work done on the team, the training for the QUISP will actually roll out. So there may be, some people may be in a little bit panic that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to get the training in time. But I think, we will have I don't know how many, TORs that have already gone through the training. They will be available immediately upon, the permit going live. But then it's going to take a little while to get the rest of the QUISPs trained and available. So that was it on the QUISP. This is just a couple little pieces of advice, just coming from our team. And all of these things have been mentioned, but, as fast as you, can get yourself in gear, look at your SWIP that you have right now and compare it to the new permit and figure out what updates you need to make, and your data, really get to know your data and look at it in advance so that maybe you can make some changes and make some improvements, prior to July 1 and never come out of baseline. I mean, your goal would be fix these things now, or if you know that you can't fix them, it's a time for you to prepare yourself. You're looking at the data, you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to go straight to level 2 and we're never going to be able to get out. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it could. And you can prepare yourself for that, or you can try come up with new ideas to prevent that from happening. Some of the things, the improvements you might want to do to avoid going into the ERA process, if you can avoid the exposures, if you can bring everything inside, we had a lot of talk about the NEC, so that's something you could work on now. Your discharges, if you can limit those. Already, start looking at your minimum BMPs. Those aren't that difficult to implement. So as soon as you can get going on those things, get them going so that you have everything in place so that you can, avoid going into the level 1. Look at your sampling techniques and make sure your people are trained, because your data is going to be out there. Everybody keeps saying it's going to be public record, and you want to make sure that your data is representative and that your techniques for collecting the data are sound. And this is the time to kind of start looking at all that to make sure that you are doing the best you can to get good data. Eliminate some of the pollutant sources if you can, in advance. And then one other thing that I missed up at the top was, if you know and you look at your data and you know that you're going to go into level 1 because you can't really change anything, then do your level 1 ERA now. I mean, just kind of there's guidelines in the permit of how to walk yourself through the process and think about the things now so that potentially you can avoid that and never have to go that route in the future. Patrick talked a lot about SMART, so get on there, get comfortable with the electronic reporting as soon as you can so that you're not stressed out at the last minute. Look at your team, build your team up. Maybe you need to add, some expertise to your team, or, maybe you need a consultant just for a little bit to help you figure some things out, and then you can just run with it. Do that now. Train your staff. And then lastly, seek help. There's a lot of resources. You've heard them up here talking today. The state board is, you can tell, look at Laurel. She's just as sweet as pie. She would never, ever do anything to harm you. So, yeah, she's very, very approachable. you know, don't be afraid to call. They're here for you, not just to, you know, slap you with a fine or something, but to, you know, really encourage. And I can guarantee, based on the year and a half working, you know, Laurel puts her heart and soul into this thing, you know, and she wouldn't do that if she, you know, just wanted to catch everybody doing something wrong. So I mean, she's definitely here to help you get through the process and do it early. Not on June 30th. Don't call her on June 30th. She won't be there. The LIRIS list, most of you probably already know about that, but that's a good way to stay in tune with what's going on. You know, you can select exactly what emails, alerts you want to receive so that you don't get, you know, 100 a day. I mean, I think I only get 1 a day, maybe sometimes 2, you know, because you just select, I can't read it, but the stormwater or whatever, yeah. Go ahead.
There's a LIRIS list for almost every program, or a couple for every program, and the state board and the regional boards have. So for the industrial stormwater LIRIS, you may only get 1 every year. You'll be getting more of them as the permit takes hold, but please get on that list. It's a really good tool. It helps us communicate with you.
That was it. See, I told you I was going to be short and sweet. Who has the microphone?
The fee for the QUISP is?
Oh, we haven't set the fee yet,
Oh,
but it's
okay.
going to probably be similar, don't you think, similar to the CGP? No, it hasn't been set yet. What do you want it to be?
I got a winery that's being constructed, and it won't be constructed and finished until after July 1. Are they going to need a QUISP to write their SWIP?
Are they discharging to an impaired water body?
Napa Valley, yes.
So the QUISP doesn't have to if we're just going to say if they're not discharging to an impaired water body, they don't need a QUISP to determine that they aren't they're not discharging that parameter like I showed in my presentation. If they're just a new facility and there's no discharge to impairments, they don't need a QUISP to do anything. Either way, the QUISP doesn't write the SWIP. So the SWIP is different than making the determination whether or not they discharge a pollutant to the impaired water body. That's what you need the QUISP for new facilities. You look confused still. What can I?
So they don't need the QUISP.
So
I'm not sure he said that.
To be precise,
Yeah.
you got a new facility, a winery, beverage, discharging stormwater to an impaired water body.
Do they discharge the parameter that the impaired water body is listed for?
Sediment, yes.
Okay, so they're going to be discharging sediment to an impaired water body. They need a
After
QUISP.
July 1.
They need a QUISP to determine, to show that they're not exceeding either the no exposure, basically they've contained it and it's not going to exceed either, or they're discharging it, they've controlled it enough to not exceed the water quality standard, or they there's another one in there that, or they don't have it. You can't get the permit otherwise.
But do they need a bona fide QUISP to write their
No,
SWIP?
but they may not be able to get the permit. It's a different.
Well, I'm confused. I understood that from the presentation that
If
a
they
QUISP
can,
has to write the SWIP for new facilities.
no, it never said that. The SWIP for new facilities, a QUISP, it's different. They don't have to write the SWIP. They have to have on file that a QUISP came out and proved that they're not discharging, for in your case, sediment to exceed a water quality standard, because they are discharging sediment, or they have no sediment. They're not discharging any sediment, or they don't have sediment exposed. You cannot be a new source to an impaired water body.
Okay, thank you.
So they might not be able to get it.
Yes.
Yeah, so she said they might not be able to get a permit.
You'd have a pond, retention ponds, anything to. And this is only the crushing operations that are covered, so not the ag. We could talk offline. It sounds like a very facility specific thing. So, if they're a new winery, they have to go through controlling their sediment to an impaired water body. Yes, not shutting them down. A new facility.
Can go over the technical part if you want.
Yeah.
I think there may be a little confusion with that. We may not have a QUISP ready in time, but you can use engineers that have experience with stormwater. So it's not going to shut down new.
But we will
wineries.
have QUISPs ready by July 1. The TORs will all be QUISP.
Well, I'm still maybe I'm confused on the question. Are you asking me about the impaired water body portion, or are you asking me about whether QUISPs are available or not? Because QUISP will be available July 1 of 2015 through the trainer of record.
Well, here's the deal. You got a new winery going on, and their discharge, unless controlled, will cause some sediment, be it minimal, to go to an impaired water body for sediment.
Yes.
So basically what I'm hearing is that the design for that winery has to be self-contained. Let's say go to their pond or wherever, and they have no discharge.
They can discharge sediment as long as it doesn't exceed the water quality standard for sediment in the impairment. Correct. It's just for the crushing.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
from that industrial area, you can't discharge sediment to exceed that impairment.
right, and they get a waiver. That's fine, but it just has to do with the design of the facility, which is going to increase their costs.
Yes.
And that's what I just got to tell my clients.
Yeah.
So that's fine. So thank you.
Any other QUISP questions?
We have some online from wherever you're
Yeah.
ready.
Oh,
Okay.
one here first.
One more here.
Could you elaborate on the trainer of record? How does one qualify to become a trainer of record? How many do you expect to have, and will there be a cost to become a trainer of record?
Yes, I will answer some of that, and then I'll defer to, what's your name? Rich. I'll defer to Rich, who is kind of heading up that subcommittee. But the trainer of record is the RFQ is going to come out, and the qualifications are going to be both training experience, meaning you've done training, you're a trainer, you know how to do training, and industrial project experience. So the applicant will have to submit both of those qualifications to show that they've actually worked on an industrial facility, familiar with industrial facilities, and then also have done training in the area of industrial stormwater or on industrial facilities. So it'll be kind of a 50-50. It's not going to be weighted one way or the other, right, Rich?
No, it's 50-50.
Yeah. So that's the qualifications. Is that what you were asking? And then the second question was, one of them was, is there going to be a fee? Yeah.
Yes, we haven't set that yet,
Yeah.
but there's a fee to apply. There's application fee. What happens is you apply, you submit your RFQ or RFQ, and then your SOQ, and then what we do is we review it. There's two people that actually review it, and so that's what you're kind of paying for, and then once it gets reviewed, the results go to CASQA, essentially, is the way it works.
Well, I guess it depends on how many submit. So, we're not, sure. We know that we're kind of resource limited on our committee as far as being able to review hundreds and hundreds of SOQs that might come in. So I don't know. I mean, I think we're hoping it's similar to the CGP.
So it'll be around 100 then if that's the case, something like that, initially. So I think what we were talking about is doing one round before July and then another round 6 months later and then a year later after that. So it's a continual process. But a lot of people are going to want to get in early and be TORs early. So.
Yeah, and especially since the compliance group leaders have to be TORs, I can see that there may be more in the first round trying to get the TOR taken care of right away.
Okay. Okay, we'll take that one, and then the gentleman in the front, and then we're going to do the online questions.
So maybe I'm the only one, but I feel like I've misunderstood the compliance group concept. I thought that we could group our facilities that have similar industrial activities into a compliance group, and then go forward with that. I thought that was a kind of an internal process to the board and to the generators, but it sounds like there are going to be contractors involved and fees probably to belong to compliance groups, so that because TORs are going to be contractors and people who are basically hired to do that. So can I get a little clarification on that whole thing?
So currently we have group monitoring leaders, and those are people that facilities pay to implement their stormwater program. They don't know, they are people independent of a facility. They have hundreds or 50 or 10 facilities that they manage in California under their group. All we've done is what's happened is we've had some issues with some of the groups. We've had some really great groups, and we've had some groups that really are not helping dischargers comply, and they're making a lot of money doing that. And so we're trying to standardize the floor so to make sure dischargers, if they're in a compliance group, they get professionals that really do have the qualifications to be helping this many facilities do their stormwater programs, and that we can give them, because of this trained professional that has gone through this whole process, they really want to help dischargers. They're trainers, they're environmental professionals, they've been around a long time. They can represent this many dischargers, and then the dischargers get a reduction in their sampling because we expect this leader to really perform as a leader, managing these facilities and their stormwater programs. So that's the precedents that have been set, and we're qualifying the leaders now. They used to be, who knows, hey, I want to start a group. Here we go. We're going to do it. And I know that there's internal where you are FedEx or something and you have all of your FedEx under a group, and then maybe the leader is not paid. But we expect that anybody who wants to be a compliance group leader can also demonstrate that they have the training experience as well as the education and background as an industrial professional and a stormwater professional. So it isn't an in-house. There's a professional that will be those leaders. Anybody can apply. There isn't you don't have to be a PhD, you don't have to be an engineer, you just have to submit your request for qualifications, and it gets graded. And the request for qualification goes out, you submit your statement of qualifications, and you get graded compared with your peers doing the same kind of work.
But it's like Michelle said, it's like 50% training,
Yeah.
50% industrial experience, so you need to have both of those.
Follow-up question on that? No.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if the benchmark values have changed from the old permit to the new permit for pollutants.
Yeah, yes. Well, just to be crystal clear, there are no benchmarks in the current permit. The current permit is just narrative BMPs and do your sampling and the like. Over the years, people have compared the numbers to benchmarks, and some of the regions have said, hey, you're kind of exceeding this. Could you do something on your site? But they are not enforceable under the current permit. What's enforceable is not responding to the regional board. So there are no US EPA benchmarks in the current permit. The new permit implements the 2008 multi-sector general permit benchmarks. They've changed a little bit. Some of the metals have gotten lower. Yeah. Okay, we're going to...
Online questions?
Okay, the first question is, when will members of the public be able to obtain QUISP certification?
Yeah, the training we're hoping is going to be rolled out in fall of 2015. So at that point, once the training materials are all prepared and the online system is ready to go, then we'll announce, and then folks can go on and do the training and get their QUISP certification.
And to follow up on that, in the trainer of record is open to the public, and that'll be available
In March. March of 2015, the RFQ should come out for the trainer of record, which if you get the trainer of record, you're going to automatically be a QUISP.
Okay, the second and last question. I understand that PEs do not have to attend the QUISP training, but do PEs need to take and pass an exam to obtain the QUISP?
No, the PEs will do a reduced online training that hasn't been developed yet, and then they will get their QUISP. They will not have to take an exam.
And we're expecting that'll be in SMARTs, like the construction permit. So now we're ready to take other questions. I wanted to clarify something that I said wrong earlier, and I apologize for that. It's hard for me to memorize everything in this permit. The contained stormwater, after I talked to Rusty, he's an engineer here at the state board. He helped me. It says pretty clearly that for contained stormwater, it is still 4 sampling events per year, so you can get the reduction just like any qualifying storm event. So it's half right, half wrong. You have to do 4 samples of your contained stormwater, and then if those are lower than the action levels after 4, you can reduce those. So, yes, I'm sorry. After the contained stormwater actually discharges the facility. So my apologies on that.
So for the trainer of record, can that be PE? And is there any difference between a PE and someone else that just has industrial experience and training experience?
No, it can be a PE. It's the same process. Well, and that's the thing. That's why I mentioned earlier, it's 50% training, 50% experience, and it takes both to get enough points to be designated to sit for the actual training.
To follow up on your clarification a moment ago, well, thank you for that, by the way. Basically, if someone has a pond and they capture all their water and they really don't need to discharge more than once or twice, they're not going to be penalized, correct? We're just making...
No, that's great.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
awesome.
It's preferable that if they don't have to discharge, it's better not to.
Absolutely.
Just explain it in the annual report.
Yep. Well, yeah, you just say that my pond only discharged twice
Okay, thank
in
you.
the reporting year.
Okay, so these are probably going back more to Laurel, your presentation. How long does a discharger have to implement the minimum BMPs required under the new permit?
Kind of an odd question. The minimum BMPs, you create your stormwater pollution prevention plan, and you put in the minimum BMPs that you're going to implement at your site, and any advanced BMPs that you think you need to consider. You pretty much have to implement that SWIP July 1 of 2015 and comply with what you've stated in the SWIP, and that SWIP has to be compliance with what the permit requires. So you have to implement your minimum BMPs and adhere to those pretty much July 1 of 2015. You can have changes to your minimum BMPs. You need to update those in your SWIP, and BMPs are seen as an iterative approach. You can change your BMPs. So if a BMP doesn't work, you can keep modifying those, but the intent is that you comply with the permit July 1, 2015, which requires minimum BMPs.
Okay, if the city has a wastewater quality control facility that is fully contained for stormwater, can this facility qualify for a NONA?
Yes, if they've designed the containment to never discharge based upon max precipitation data.
I don't understand your pH testing. So right now, the pH is tested from the water sample.
Yeah.
Are you saying the pH has to be tested when the sample is pulled?
Yeah.
Yes. So what 40 CFR 136 says is that the holding time for pH, meaning how long you have between drawing the sample and testing it, is 15 minutes. Unless you're Lawrence Livermore or have a large facility with a lab on site, it's going to be really hard to get that sample to a lab within 15 minutes. So we require that you do it in the field, either through a meter if you have an effluent limitation guideline from the EPA for pH, or if you go through our exceedance response actions for pH. So if you're not doing that, you can do the testing at the time that you pull the sample, within 15 minutes of pulling the sample in the field.
Okay, next question.
And I'll say one thing: if you can get it to the lab within 15 minutes, that's okay too. But that's really few and far between.
Okay, will wastewater treatment plants greater than 1 MGD still be required to obtain coverage under the IGP?
Yes, they would require coverage per attachment A, exactly what attachment A says.
Okay, have sample parameters been set yet? If so, what are they?
That's a good. Well, we have a set of parameters everyone has to do: pH, total suspended solid, and oil and grease. Based upon your SIT code, those are in the permit, and it's table 1 on page 41 of the order. That shows you what you would have to do based upon your industrial code. If your industrial code doesn't appear there, lucky you, you just have the base parameters. And everybody has to really keep in mind any parameters that you know, like you know that you're doing this industrial activity and it's not in the permit, you're responsible for those. So if there's one that you know you're discharging and it's not listed in those two things in the permit, you're still responsible for them. So that is not listed per facility. That's something that you have to do through your pollutant source assessment.
I think you've addressed the rest of the questions.
I got some clients down in Bakersfield. Okay, the discharges either stay on site to the facility, or if they go into the municipal curb and gutter, they go to a retention basin and never enter the body of water of the state or the feds. Do they have to sample?
If they have a notice of intent, yes, because they're saying that they do discharge to waters of the U.S.
They're not discharging the waters of the U.S. They're going to a municipal retention basin.
But if they have a permit, they have to comply with the permit. But if there's no in the permit, if you have an NOI and you pay a fee, we assume you're going to be sampling. If not, you'd have to work something out with the regional board. Or they get the notice of non-applicability saying that they're hydrologically disconnected to waters of the U.S. and they don't have a permit.
So, okay, so that means if they could utilize the municipal system to verify that they're not discharging to the body of water.
Yes, and also in that geographic location, and they need a professional engineer to certify that. We're also working with some of the regions that have a lot of these kind of basins to try to figure out some way that we can streamline that for people that are low income and don't have a lot of money to pay PEs to do these kinds of things. We're trying to see what we can do. It's in the works.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you determine whether you're connected or not?
It's difficult. It's very site specific and very specific to where you're located. By discussing with the regional boards, the Army Corps has a list of basins, and they've put them on this list whether or not if they're on that list, they don't discharge to waters. They're contained basins, and they don't connect to waters of the U.S. But it's just a list. It doesn't have a map involved. I hear the Army Corps of Engineer maps are really hard to get. So you need to really contact and work with your regional boards and state board on those kind of basins. And your PE is expected to do that work for you in the technical report to determine whether or not you're hydrologically connected. If you're not in one of those basins that's everyone pretty knows jurisdictionally is not connected, it's even a little more of a study depending upon exactly where you are, how low the groundwater is. If you're in a floodplain, it's probably not going to happen, and things of those nature. We're really trying to get together some guidance on what we're looking for in these reports, and if you call me, I usually give you a good rundown of what we're expecting to see. We're not looking at somebody submitting a report that says, yeah, I don't discharge here. It has to be a little more. It's signed by a PE. We're expecting some kind of analysis, some infiltration studies of your soil, how low is the groundwater, and then maybe some of the characteristics of the surrounding area. Did you look up the listings from the Army Corps of Engineer to show that that basin is, disconnected from waters of the U.S.? Have you looked for losing streams in there? Do they, when you have a flash flood, do they actually connect somewhere, and things of that nature? So really your PE is supposed to do that kind of a study, and they're supposed to hire people that, or contract with people like geomorphologists and things that can help with that as well. That's why we're trying to work with some of the regional boards that have a lot of these and a lot of dischargers that can't potentially afford a PE, trying to get a consolidated steps forward for those large areas with lots of industrial dischargers. Yeah. So, it may be something like that. We're working on it to be determined, but otherwise it's this PE is doing their work. They're signing it, so they're putting their license front that they've done. We don't have a model. We don't have a system to do that. It's an analysis by your PE. I can't. I'm having trouble hearing. No, it's hydrologic disconnection. Never would discharge to waters of the U.S.
What?
And then there's for that one, and then there's the no discharge, which is you've designed your site to the max precipitation event. There's two of them.
Well, I think I've got a lot of, that's fine. Following along with that, this maximum discharge event, how do you determine what rainfall event is that?
It's a really good question.
I mean, 100-year storm, a 500, 1,000, where are we at?
So what it really comes, I thought you were going to ask a different question that we've had a couple engineers ask me, which is which storms do I look at historically to see the sizing? And they really have to look at all the storms, the 5-year, the 100-year, even the bigger ones. And pretty much your site is designed to never discharge to the largest storm ever that happened based upon the records that exist.
Going to his point, though, on some of these retention basins, they're actually meant for only a 10 or a 50-year storm, and then they overflow and go to the next thing. So how do we show another? But then there's another retention basin downstream from that. So,
okay.
And going back to what you said, they're in low-income areas where you're trying to help people out. I think there should be some sort of standard set.
I agree.
To establish, hey, a 100-year storm does.
We tried to do the standard, and it got turned. We could not legally say that you never reach waters of the U.S. based upon the 100-year storm. We tried to do the FEMA and all of that, so we're stuck with this kind of nebulous professional. And the professional engineers are supposed to try to work out the best way to do that.
How do you certify something won't reach there when there's no physical way?
And they may not certify them, so they may have to get the permit.
If there's no standard, you can't certify it. The second thing is I'm a little confused on the PE and the QUISP. So on July 1st, if you're not a trainer of record but you are a PE, is there a method before the fall to become a QUISP?
We're still working that schedule out for PEs when they can be QUISPs.
Okay.
Thank you. So along the lines of what was just being discussed, the Find Your Receiving Water tool that's going to be developed for smarts. So when you put it in a Latin long and it tells you what your receiving water is, I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that you're connected to that receiving. You're just in that basin, or you're just in that area.
So the way we're working that one out is there's this National Hydrology Data Set Plus that is a huge network of all the stream, all the little water segments in the entire nation. And we've taken the California set of the streams, and if you overlay that with a watershed boundary, basically where all the water from that boundary, it all goes to kind of one point, the watershed boundaries. And then you put a discharger within there, and you also add the impaired segments of all those streams in California. You should be able to say, okay, here's my point. I discharged to one of these. It's either A, B, C, or D. And then the discharger, we're hoping they can pick which one they think based upon the map and when they put in their Latin long. The reason that we have trouble saying, oh, you're right here and this is what your impairments are and things, is that you could be 2 feet from there, but you might have a huge canal right there that goes somewhere else. We don't know exactly where your water goes. We'll never really know unless we had that information from everybody. So we're just trying to give people a head start on what they may discharge into based upon the drainage of the hydrologic features in that data set. And then the other thing that tool will give you is the option to say none of those. But the reason we're trying to develop it is that you're on the hook to look at what impairments you have to sample for, and we're trying to help tell you which ones you may have to consider. So you'd get the list, you'd click on one, and it would, or you'd put in your Latin long, and it would populate a table that has, Little Creek, pH, TSS, and dissolved oxygen, and then it would say, Cattle River, and then it has mercury and something else, and then you would try to figure out which one you discharge to based upon the map.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Laurel, we have an online question.
Sure.
Will wastewater lift stations require coverage?
I'm not familiar with what that is. If someone could... Oh, no. I don't think so.
Anybody else?
I'd have to have more information. I'm sorry. I'm happy to follow up with them. I'm not sure. That's it? Okay. Wow, we're on time. Yay. Thank you. I know. That would be part of a bigger system, right? Hi, yeah. Yeah, it's so if you have that situation, the region board asks you to, you have to respond, or if you really want to. You're welcome. Who? Was it? Oh. My dad's from that area.